And good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing today? John Barris, look at that. Got a Psych 150 lecture and a Psych 240 lecture, 241 lecture today. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Marwa. Marwa, how you doing? Good to see you back. Imani, always good to see you back as well. Shamay, nice to meet you. Hope I pronounced that name correctly. Hey, hey, good morning, Ryan Wheeler. Good gosh, this feels like old times. It seems like I'm seeing everybody from my past now. This feels great. Good morning, Her Life Sparkles. What's your name? So I can call you by your name. Otherwise, I can call you Sparkles if you like. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. John Barris, good to see you as well. Deja vu, to be sure, my friend, to be sure. All right. So I hope everybody is doing well. It's good to see you. Hi, Katie. Good to see you. Thanks for coming today. Good morning, Kaylee. Wow, what a great crowd today. Victor Akpo, good to see you as well. Huh, that's good to hear, Andrea. Thank you. Makes me feel very validated and loved, right? Aw. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate your warm sentiments. And I'm looking forward to having you as well. I hope everybody comes, was it Thursday night at 6 p.m. if you can to our webinar. So these YouTube lectures are going to be more one way. I'm going to do most of the talking, although you are welcome to type in the chat bar and I will answer that whenever you want. But this is more me telling you stuff. And then the Thursday night webinars hopefully are going to be more student focused and you're going to do the talking. Those of you who are new in my class see that I have several dedicated, wonderful student fans here, and I appreciate them. And I hope by the time we get to the end of this semester, you are feeling as warmly towards me as well. I know I'm moving so many classes and I'm changing so many things around. If you would, Andrea, tell me which part of the syllabus you saw that on so I can go change that before Thursday, okay? You know, Dr. Roddenberry, I am the typo king, right? I am the typo king. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Whoa, look at that. I am kind of, you know what? Hold on, let me do something. I don't like the way this looks. Filters, chroma key. Let's see. I'm gonna do just a little bit because I don't feel like fading out. I feel like I'm fading out and disappearing. The webinar is going to be at 6 p.m. on Shimei. Yes. Here's the deal. I had to pick a time, Shimei. I hope that works for you. If it doesn't, you can't make it. I totally understand and I apologize in advance. But 6 was the only time I could work the webinar this semester. I hope it does work for you, okay? So, chapter one, like most classes, chapter one, like most textbooks, chapter one is sort of an introduction and an overview of how the class is going to run. And developmental psychology's textbook is no different. And so, what we're going to try to do this week is we're going to cover these 5 points. I'm going to try to explain to you why the lifespan perspective is important. We're going to talk about the organizing principles of development, how this book is organized. We're going to talk about 8 principles or sort of truths that developmental psychologists have discovered. We're going to talk about different ways of thinking about aging and characterizing aging. And then we're going to talk about some of the developmental issues that are important to the study of developmental psychology. Holy cow, as I live and breathe, it is Ronique in class. How are you doing, my friend? You're at clinic. Okay, fantastic. Well, you participate all you can, Ronique. And I was telling the students before you got here that we are having webinars Thursday nights at 6 p.m. I hope you can make it, Ronique, because you're always one of my most outspoken and most interesting and funniest crazy students. So I hope you can make it on Thursday nights. Wow, look at that. We've got Ryan, Ronique, Andrea, Marwa. This is going to be a great class this semester. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am. Wait a minute. Did something just come out? Oh, that's somebody sending me a message. Ah, Andrea Nicole. Thank you very much. I just got the message. I just got the text. Kind of freaked me out. All I saw was 7 p.m. and I'm like, oh my God, I sent out a message for a meeting on today. Okay, cool. So you know what? Let's go ahead and if we can, go ahead and get started. All right. So what is human development? I totally get it, Andrea. In fact, that's why I wanted you to send me the message because I'll be off to some other adventure at 11 o'clock and I'll forget as well. All right, so human development is the pattern of change in humans, which begins, see the typo, I'm sorry, king of the typo here, which begins at conception and continues until death. This change occurs in our physical body, our emotional functioning, and our intellectual abilities. Human development involves growth as well as decline in these qualities brought on by aging. Developmental processes are affected by genes, psych studies, and our environment. Psychological qualities in our environment. And we're going to unpack all of this over the course of this semester. But basically, what I want you to understand is that developmental psychology is the study of change. If you remember from Psych 150, we studied cognitive psychology, remember, which is people's memory. Well, a cognitive developmental psychologist, would be interested in how our memory abilities develop over the course of our lifespan. Okay. When we talked about biological psychology, we talked about neurons and brain modules and myelination and all of that stuff. But a developmental psychologist is interested in how the brain changes as we grow and get older. Okay, we can talk about personality the same way. A personality psychologist is interested in developing tests to measure personalities. However, a developmental psychologist would ask the question, how does your personality develop as you get older? So, development is just that process of maturation and change that occurs as we get older. And a couple of notes here. This is a multidisciplinary approach. And so we're going to talk about biology, sociology, all of these other things. But the weird thing is, human development is usually taught by a psychologist. But I want you to know that it is multidisciplinary. I'm going to be talking about sociology. I'm going to be talking about genetics and biology. I'm going to be talking about anthropology. We're going to talk about maybe even history. And all of these people are interested in understanding how people change as they grow and develop. All right. Now, it occurs over the lifespan. So we're going to talk about prenatal development. And I want you to know that Dr. Roddenberry at 52 years of age is not done evolving. I'm still changing and becoming a different person. And I want you to know that you are going to change and evolve over the course of your lifespan too. Not only are we going to talk about your abilities as they grow, but as you get older, these abilities are going to then start to decline. So we're going to talk about that as well. Why the hell should I care about developmental psychology? Well, I'll tell you why. If you're a nurse, each of your patients is going to have different needs based upon their age. And so you're going to respond to a 6-year-old patient differently than you respond to a 48-year-old patient. And so developmental psychology will sort of give you an appreciation of what's in that person's mindset when you're dealing with them. If you're a manager, my wife is old like me. She's 50. And I forget what we are, Generation X. I forget what our generation is. She's always talking to me about millennials, and she manages a hotel, and she's always managing millennials, and people in a different generation. If you're a manager, it's important for you to understand how people in different generations, how they see the world different than you. It's very important. Same thing with teachers. You've got to understand what's in your kid's mind depending upon their age. I don't know if any of you are in the teaching program, but if you're trying to teach a fourth grader, you're going to teach them in a different way than you will teach an eighth grader or a 12th grader. And you know what? More importantly, developmental psychology is the single reason that human beings live as long as they do. All right, so look at this chart right here. The best reason you'll live longer. Here's the thing, scientists think that human beings can live to be somewhere around 125 to 130 years of age. That's what we would call the maximum lifespan. Okay. Hi, Ty. Thanks for coming in. We're talking about why you should study developmental psychology. And I want you to know that developmental psychology, or the developmental perspective, is what has improved the lifespan of human beings. Current life expectancy, the average lifespan, is about 79 years of age. Average lifespan is the age at which half of your classmates will be dead. So I graduated in the class of 1987. So if you think about it, all the people that went to my high school and graduated in 1987 are the same age. We were all born about the same year, 1969. The question is, at what point will half of us be dead? And so the average life expectancy is the point at which half of your classmates will be dead. And so the average life expectancy is 79. 79. Ron Muse will be 65 in, let's see, in 2046. Okay, here's the deal. Half of my cohort of men will still be alive at the end of 2046. I don't know if you knew this, but in 1900, the average lifespan was 47. 47 in the year of 1900 in America. If you were born in 1900, the odds were that you were going to be dead by the age of 47. Holy cow, right? Now, in the space of 120 years, we have increased the average lifespan from 47 to 79. That's 32 years. Why has that occurred? Well, because we know how human beings develop and what kills human beings and what we need to do to exactly John's science. Now, what increases the average lifespan? Well, we know the importance of prenatal care for children. And so now we don't lose as many babies in the first year of life, right? Because they have disorders caused by their moms ingesting dangerous items. I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to talk to you about it in the next couple of weeks. The most common cause of death during the first 25 to actually 30 years of your life is going to be accidents. Did you know that accidents are the leading cause of death until you reach your 30s? So that's why we wear bike helmets. That's why we wear seat belts. And that's why we don't have things like lawn darts anymore, because the data have shown that people accidentally kill themselves. So if we know how to take care of moms while they're pregnant with babies, if we know how to avoid the dangers and the things that kill children early in age, we're increasing the average lifespan. And so what I want you to know is that people are living better, longer, due in part to better sanitation, better nutrition, and better medicine. And not only are people living longer, but they're living happier and they're living better lives. So what's developmental psychologists are interested in, and we're going to mention this especially as we start to talk about aging and getting older, is we're not just talking about living longer, we're talking about living better. Okay. And so I'm going to be using this term throughout the semester called well-being. And we live in more sanitation. You're absolutely right, Ronique. Well-being. So not only are you going to live physically better and be healthier, but we hope through developmental psychology to know how to help people have emotionally happier lives and how people can be more productive intellectually. You know, you don't want to be that 90-year-old that's lost their mind, that has no memory, that's lost their intellectual abilities. We want you to be a 90-year-old still sharp as a tack in your mind. So, when we talk about developmental psychology and its help in our lives, we're talking about well being. It doesn't just make us live longer, it makes us live happy. Excuse me. Ah, okay, I'm still learning my keyboard here, dadgummit. All right, so how the developmental perspective shapes public discussions and policy. So, I know, right, John? Sorry, I'm such a dork. So here's the thing, like how developmental perspective shapes public discussions and policy. One of the things that I'm going to tell you over the course of this semester is as you get older, you need to get your butt in the gym or on the run or on the road doing yourself cardio. Cardio, cardio, cardio. Exercise is the best way to keep your mind as you get older. Okay, so if you want to avoid losing your intellectual functions, exercise, exercise, exercise. Okay, now, policy issues are actually driven by developmental psychologists. We often talk about deaths of despair. Suicide is considered a death of despair. Overdoses are deaths of despair. People do these because they're sad and they engage in these dangerous behaviors. And so, in learning about these, developmental psychologists learning what ages, the second most common cause after death is going to be suicide. I don't know if you know that, but that's also one of the most common causes of death in teenage and young adulthood. And so we're interested in developmental psychologists know this and they can impact policy issues. When we were going through the COVID, the question was, do we keep kids out of school because it keeps them from getting infected with the COVID disease? But on the other hand, keeping kids at home makes them sad and lonely. And so, there's a big debate. How quickly do you send the kids back to school? What's the relative risks of catching an illness and dying versus developing despair and depression and damage related to being alone, right? And so we're also going to talk about how ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and gender affect your lifespan outcomes. The best thing that you can do for your lifespan is not be a guy. It turns out that women live longer than do men. And we're going to talk about some of the ethnic and socioeconomic factors that affect health, well being, and dying. Exactly, John Barris. Kids need social interaction in early development. And while we wanted to keep the kids away from the potentially dangerous virus, irreparable harm was done in keeping kids out of school for 2 years. And what we have to do as developmentalists is say which was more important, their physical health or damage, which was more profound, the damage to physical health or the damage to psychological health. Great point. Thank you for bringing that up, John. And in fact, John, the focus of Thursday night's class is going to be on that very. I don't know about that, Renique. I think they're more likely to say, hey, y'all, watch this, right? Men engage in more dangerous behavior too. It's the testosterone, I think, that kills us, right? But we're going to be talking about the effect of COVID and COVID policy Thursday night in class. Okay. And then, you know what? Over the course of the semester, I'm going to be giving you parenting suggestions. You can pay attention to these parenting suggestions or you can ignore these parenting suggestions. They're up to you. But developmental psychologists definitely have things to say about the best way to raise a child. Okay? Now, check it out. Our textbook is going to be organized two ways, three ways, two ways. Okay? Two ways. All right? And I'm going to suggest to you that when human beings develop, they develop along three broad dimensions independently of one another. Human beings develop Human beings develop physically, okay? Your biological processes develop, your brain develops, your personality develops, and then your mental abilities develop. These are three different human qualities. Now, the crazy thing is, these three human qualities do not develop at the same speed in every person. And if I give you this example over here, how many of you were the most physically developed person in class? Do you boys remember that first boy that had beard or chest hairs? You remember the boy that was most physically developed? Ladies, do you remember your female friend who went through puberty first and began developing breast and needed a bra first, right? So some of the females and males develop faster physically, but the person that developed the fastest physically may not have been the most mature person, right? Or the person whose mind was developed the farthest, intellectual abilities were developed. So the thing is, human beings develop along three different dimensions, sort of independently, if you will. Now, why is this important? Well, when we study human beings in human development, uh, I was the shortest in my class in ninth grade, and after that summer, I was the second tallest in 10th grade. You know what, John? I don't like you. I was always the shortest person in my class. Always, 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 always. So I'm jealous of you, John. Right. So, and it depends. John brings up a good point. Development doesn't happen in a smooth process. Sometimes we experience a bump in our developmental abilities, and sometimes our developmental change slows down a little bit. That's another great point. But here's the thing. This book, in the study of human beings, is organized around these broad dimensions. Some people study the biological processes of development. Some people study the cognitive processes of development. And people study the personality development, right? There you go. Imani, still 5 feet at 41 years young. Very good, Imani. You and I are both the shortest person in class, and it's okay, doggone it. Now, here's the crazy thing. What we are going to do is this book is going to be organized by these three processes. So we're going to have a chapter on the biological processes of development, a chapter on personality development, and a chapter on cognitive development. But you'll notice that there are more than 3 chapters in this book. There are actually 20 chapters in this book. And so what we're also going to do is we're going to organize the study of human beings into different age groups called periods of development. And you'll see that picture right underneath me. So we're going to talk about prenatal development in this class. We're going to talk about infancy in this class. We're going to talk about early childhood. And each of these periods represents a different set of biological developmental principles, a set of personality abilities, and a set of cognitive processes, right? So first we're going to talk about prenatal development. And actually the first chapter 2 and chapter 3 are going to be about genetics and prenatal development. And then when we get to chapter 4, we're going to talk about infancy, but we're going to talk about biological processes in infancy. And then in chapter 5, we're going to talk about cognitive development in infancy. And then in chapter 6, we're going to talk about personality development in infancy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move, as we go through this class, we're going to move through each developmental period, and we're going to talk about the biological changes, the cognitive changes, and the personality changes that occur during development. Okay, great. Well, go ahead and type that question in, John, because I'm sure everybody else will be interested in hearing your question. And at this point, I want to tell you that up until about 1904, nobody really thought of adolescence as a unique period of human development. We had children and we had adults. But this fellow named G. Stanley Hall was the first to realize that we really ought to distinguish this sort of middle period between childhood and adulthood. He was kind of the first person to champion this idea of periods of development. Now we actually have we even have a different period that your book's not going to talk about. And you could stick, actually, let me see, how can I do that? I'm going to go to this screen. No, 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 I'm not going to go to that screen because that's a terrible screen. I'm going to go to, let's see, whiteboard. And I'm going to click on slide deck. There you go. So you can see this. And let's see if you see my hand. Right here, between adolescence and early adulthood, there's actually a new stage called emerging adulthood that people now talk about. Emerging adulthood. And it's actually seen as that period between adolescence and early adulthood. One of the questions referred to G. Stanley Hall, the father of adolescence, from the book Knows, mentioned to him in chapter 11. Okay. Do I have him listed as a father of psychology? You know, you can't really, when psychology was invented, you can't really pinpoint, no person stood up and was recognized officially as the inventor of psychology. But he was the first person to sort of champion this idea of change and evolution. So, in that sense, I refer to him as the father of psychology. Okay, no big deal. You know what? That may be John Barris. That actually may represent. Bothers you, don't feel uptight about it. Okay. So, right here, I have a quick slide. I want you to see how your textbook is organized. Genetics and pregnancy are chapters 2 and 3. Then, like I said, in infancy, we're going to cover chapter 4 is physical development, chapter 5 is cognitive development, chapter 6 is socio-emotional development. Then you're going to notice we're going to go back and do the same thing again for early childhood. Physical and cognitive development in chapter 7, and then socio development in chapter 8. Then you're going to see we're going to go through middle childhood and we're going to do the same thing again. And you're going to notice this pattern. We're going to go through each age. I'm going to talk about physical development, cognitive development, and socio emotional development. Because what we think is that each age, each period of development, important things are happening in each of these three domains. Does that make sense to everybody? I like to do this to sort of give you an appreciation of how this course is going to occur, because this is sort of how we organize the study of human change. Now, if you remember back from Psych 150, when I was talking about cognitive psychology, I didn't really focus on infant cognitive abilities. I talked about short-term memory, long-term memory, and sensory memory, but I didn't talk about how those abilities changed based upon your age. But we're going to do that. In each ability that we talked about in your Psych 150 class, we're going to look at over the course of the lifespan as it changes, all right? Now, here's the deal. In chapter 1, they do sort of, I talked about the periods of development, and your textbook is really developed that way, is really organized that way. But you know, these idea of these different periods of development are what we would call a social construction. Actually, I'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about this. Here's the deal. Over the course of the semester, what I am hoping to give you an appreciation of is this idea that age is just one way, age from days since birth is only one way of thinking about aging. Okay, most of us are used to talking about chronological age. And so we can talk about the number of years that have elapsed since birth. But you know what? We're also going to talk, especially as you get older, age, chronological age becomes less important. Some people live to be 100. Some people only live to be 55. And so you can think about aging as occurring on a biological level too. And so people age, their biological processes can age them quicker or slower. And you know what? You can think about psychological age as well. So you can think about your mind. How old is your mind? How old is your intellectual abilities? And you know, some people talk about social aging, which is how we change and how our relationships change as we develop different social circles. You know, from your immediate family as an infant to your school family as a teenager to your social friend family clique as a young kid to your development of your family when you decide to pair up and have children. And so I'm going to ask you the question, how old do you feel in your mind? So let's think about this psychologically. How old are you chronologically? And how old do you feel in your mind? So I'll be the first to do that. So I am 52, and honestly, I feel 18 in my mind. So I feel I'm 52 years old, but I feel 18. There you go, Ryan. He's 45, but he feels 13 some days. That's hilarious. I know exactly what you mean. You know, I pop out of bed some mornings and my 16-year-old mind takes over, but my 52-year-old body says, stop. There you go, Juanita. Juanita feels she's 28 and feels, can we add body pain too? Absolutely. Right, John. There you go. You folks are hilarious. By the way, happy birthday, John. Maybe we'll sing happy birthday to you if you come to class on Thursday night. Okay. So we can think about age in terms of all. I'm 21, mentally 70, 107 in body pain. Okay, you folks are hilarious. I guess you're going to find out over the semester that I can be a very immature guy. Oh boy. So there you go. All right. So, you know, because we can think of age in sort of this non chronological age, one of the things that I do want to talk about, and this is going to become more important as we focus on older adulthood. So these periods of development are just a social construction. I'm going to call infancy infancy, but there's no biological reason that we should have this period from 0 to 1 and call it infancy. I'm going to tell you that early childhood is the time from infancy to when you go to school at the age of 5. Now, there's no reason that we have to call that early childhood. We just call it that. There's nothing biological about that. We just call it that because it's useful for thinking about the people at this age. This is just a social construction. And so the periods of development that we're following in this textbook, um, are a social construction we think is useful for studying and teaching people about human development. Okay. Yeah, right. Happy 39th birthday to John Barris. So I decided to put his picture here so everybody could see him. That's funny. But the four ages was a way of thinking about age that was used to help talk about the process of aging that occurs especially as we get older. So the first age and the second age, childhood and adolescence, these people say it's the first age. Prime adulthood, 29 to 59 is the second age. But the real reason that people talk about the four ages is because when people get older today, people age at vastly different speeds. I'm sure some of you have parents and know older people who are in their 60s who are having trouble walking and seeing and having medical problems, and people who are losing their minds in their early 60s. But you know what? Because of what we've learned in developmental psychology, more people are living into their 80s and 90s fully functional, right? And so we've realized back in 1900, when they started studying developmental psychology, most of the time when not that many people made it to 60 and 65 and 70. So there was no real need to talk about really, really old people. But we've begun to realize that people from 60 to 100, really, you can think about them as in two sort of distinct groups: the third age from approximately 60 to 80, and the fourth age from approximately 80 to 100. Now, why is this important, Chris? Well, here's the deal. A lot of people think that you're going to start losing your memory and your intellectual abilities and your physical abilities when you get into retirement age 60, 65, 69. What I'm going to talk to you about this semester is that the changes that occur during the third age are a result of behavioral practices. That is, if you decide to exercise, if you decide to eat right, if you decide to avoid drinking to excess or smoking cigarettes or taking hard drugs, if you have a good group of people and develop a good set of friends and a close set of family, you actually can prevent all of the negative qualities we typically associate with aging. So, you know what? Yeah, your mind is eventually going to not be as sharp as it used to be, but it doesn't have to occur at 65 or 70. Now, what we find is that when people get into their 80s and 90s, these positive effects of behavioral changes aren't going to be as strong. But what I want you to know from this class is that you don't have to get old as quickly as you think you do. So, because of my injury, your 40 is the new 80. Absolutely, absolutely. But, you know, in playing off John Barris's joke, you've probably heard people say 60 is the new 40, 50 is the new 30. What they're talking about is this idea that we can have a third and a fourth age. Depending upon our behavioral choices, we can actually choose to stay young and vibrant for a longer period. So I'm 52 years old, but if any of you turkeys wants to go down to the gym with me today, I will work your butt into the ground. I promise. Let's go for a 5 mile jog. You want to pump some iron? Dr. Roddenberry will lift some weight, and I'll bet you I can outdo you. Which is more affecting? Well, the deal is the physical and mental are connected, Imani. So the thing is, the more you exercise, the better your mental faculties will be, and the longer they will remain intact. So there's sort of this biofeedback. Now, here's the deal: having a positive mindset, having a good group of people, and you know what, even though it's not for me, going to church, having social groups as you get older, going to bingo, these kinds of personality qualities, being happy, is actually going to go back and affect your physical health. So the weird thing is your physical health affects your mental health can affect your physical health. So it's sort of a bit of both. Thank you very much, Andrea. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, here's the deal. What I want you to do is to think back onto your family members, your older family members, living and deceased. And you know, we can think of three sort of developmental patterns of aging: normal aging, pathological aging. Well, John brings a great question. So, if you're physically limited, can you exercise your mom to help present mental loss? Uh, yes. Now, the lack of physical activity is actually, John, both your physical activity and the intellectual activities you engage in will improve your ability to keep your mental faculties, right? So not only do you need to get in the gym and exercise, John, but you need to still keep reading. You need to still keep solving problems. You still need to go to work, because the intellectual challenge of being at work will keep you young. So, yes, if you're physically limited, you can still exercise your mind. But even if you're not physically limited, John, you'll be better off if you exercise your mind. Does that make sense, John? And if you're physically limited, you can exercise your mind, but there are some effects that you're going to miss because you can't get out there and exercise. But yeah, that's a great point too. The brain needs to keep being challenged and being worked out. Right, exactly. You know how they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks? You know what, you old dogs, you need to get out there and learn some new tricks. Always be learning new tricks. In fact, folks, check this out. Dr. Roddenberry is learning how to hablo español right now. CCC. Aprendiendo hablar español. And if we have any Spanish students in here, don't laugh at my poor Spanish skills. But Dr. Roddenberry is trying to learn a new trick. And in fact, I went and took an ESL certificate last semester at NC State University. I went there and got myself another degree. Why? Because I want to keep that brain worked out. There you go. Imani knows. Roll your uh, roll my L. Okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, John. I will learn that. There you go. Imani has met my Nana right here. This is my wife's grandma. She represents what we would call successful aging. Now, Nana actually, she died last fall at the age of 101. But you know what? Nana lived to be 101. She actually drove to the party you see her at. This is her 99th birthday party. She actually drove to her 99th birthday party and to her 100th birthday party. She was still sharp enough physically. Her eyes were a little bit shady, but she drove during the day. But her mind and her reflexes were still sharp enough that she drove to her 100th birthday party. You know what? She still managed her 3 real estate properties in her bank account until she was 100. She is an example of successful aging. And the goal over this semester, and I'm going to mention Nana a couple of times, my goal is to teach you the proper health behaviors so that you can live like Nana as well. You know, it's kind of funny. When I was 24, I got an earring. I don't know if you noticed that. I got an earring in 1986 when I was a 16-year-old kid, right? And I was one of the first on my block. I got earrings back when guys didn't get earrings. And so I met my wife, and before she took me home to meet Nana, she told me, she's like, hey, Chris, my family's old fashioned. They don't like earrings. You're going to have to take the earring out. And so I would take it out. And then right before we got married, she said, can you take the earring out permanently? And I'm like, okay, when can I have my earring back? She said, well, when my grandparents die. This was 1994, and her grandmother was 76. Now, and I figured, okay, cool. Grandparents usually live into their early 80s. I got 5 years and I can put my earring back on. You know what? It turns out that I put my earring back in on my grandma's 100th birthday. I looked at my wife and I was like, dude, you misled me. You tricked me into taking my earring out. You didn't tell me your grandma was going to live forever. And so she's an example of successful aging. Now, how many of you have a family member? How many of you have a family member that is old and feeble at the age of 64, 65? You know, my mom died of emphysema. Yes, she did have those. I didn't include those. I didn't include Nana's rules for living. But you know what? I'll bring that to webinar on Thursday night, Andrea. And yeah, we're going to talk about Nana's rules for living a long life because she had some very good advice that I have followed that I hope will help me live a long life and hope you live a long life as well. Y'all are hilarious. Okay, now here's the deal. Quickly, we're running out of time. One of the things that I'm going to teach you over the course of this semester is you are going to learn that development is lifelong. You do not develop as children and then become finished at 18 years of age. You're not finished at 39, John. You're not finished at 42. You're not finished at any age. Let's see. Chame, you're not done at 23. Kaylee, you're not done at 20. Andrea and Nicole, you're certainly not done at 36. Development is lifelong. As I mentioned to you, it is multidimensional. We develop physically, we develop cognitively, and we develop emotionally, right? It is also multi-directional. If you look at this picture underneath me, this is a demonstration of how your mind changes as you get older. Our ability, our fluid intelligence decreases much quicker as we get older. What's fluid intelligence? It's the speed of your thinking and it's the creativity of your thinking. So development is multi-directional. Not only do our abilities increase as we get older, but then at some point they peak and our abilities begin to decline. So that's part of the developmental process as well. I talk about this in my intro psych class. Those of you who didn't take intro psych may not have heard this term, but we talk about neuroplasticity. Brains come incomplete, and your brain it wires itself together over the first several years of your life. And because it comes incomplete, it can respond to environmental changes or challenge. Humans' development is plastic. There is neuroplasticity. If you are born with one part of your brain missing, different parts of your brain will take over that function that is missing. This is called neuroplasticity. So human development is very flexible and can respond to environmental changes. Now, I do want you to know that even though I am a developmental psychologist teaching this, yep, knock on wood when you hit your head, right? One of the things, even though I am a psychologist teaching psychology, I want you to know that lots of different types of scientists are interested in developing. Like I said, evolutionary biologists are interested in development. Geneticists are interested in development. Sociologists, anthropologists, all of these different types of scientists are interested in how people change as they grow older. This is a multidisciplinary field. I'm just the lucky one that gets to teach it to you, okay? Now, your development is a function of biological factors, cultural factors, and individual factors. And as you're going to find out this semester in webinar, if you come to my webinars, Ronique is from the Caribbean islands. And so Ronique is definitely going to give us his Caribbean perspective on how human beings develop. And we're going to learn how culture and other personality factors affect the way we develop. You know, there are different developmental trajectories for males and females. There are different forces that cause me to develop in the prototypical male, and there are forces that might cause you to change into the prototypical female. Yes, John Barris is talking about this. Exactly. What it turns out that the knowledge that you acquire, what you know, you will know, you will know. And so as your mind gets older, you're going to remember all the facts you ever knew, but you're just going to be less creative in your thinking. Absolutely, John. That's a great point. I wasn't going to talk too much about that. That's a rabbit hole. I could spend 5 minutes talking about that and not get on with the lecture. But yeah, we're going to talk about when we get to the late chapters and talk about cognitive decline in middle adulthood. We're going to talk about the difference in crystallized and fluid intelligence and how they change as we get older. Great point. Great point. Okay. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about in webinar on Wednesday night is contextual influences. Context affects development. Human beings go through events that change how they are. COVID changed everybody's development, each and every one of us, no matter your age. Spending 2 weeks in your room under house restriction affected how your life changed. COVID definitely changed how our life developed. Now, sometimes these environmental changes are normative, and some of these are what we call non-normative. So here's the deal. Having COVID happen is a non-normative life event, and that affected how you changed. Actually, you know what? That's not a good example. Let's talk about that with cohort effects. But let's talk about normative and non-normative great events. Here's the deal. We all graduate high school at around age 18 here in this culture. That's a normative age-graded influence. Most people pair bond with a romantic partner during their early 20s. That's a normative event. Most people lose their parents in middle adulthood. When you're 30 or 40 or maybe even 50, your parents will die. These are normative age graded influences. These are context events that affect who we are. When my mom died when I was 38, it changed me a little bit. But that's supposed to happen. We're going to differentiate that from non-normative life events. Sometimes people will lose parents in childhood. You're not supposed to have that happen. But you know what? Sometimes it happens. It's not advisable to get pregnant at 14. Sometimes people get pregnant at 14. Most people don't get pregnant at 50 or 55. Occasionally, with fertility drugs, that happens. These are non normative events which can change our developmental trajectory. You're supposed to get cancer later in your life, or at least it's not uncommon. If you had cancer as a child, that would be a non-normative event, right? And then with regard to cohorts, sometimes events happen in historical epics that change all of us. So like COVID happened to us, and everybody who was in elementary school when COVID happened will forever be changed by what happened during COVID. That's what we would call a cohort effect. And so we're going to be talking not only about how we develop, but how these events, these cohort events affect us. So on Wednesday night, we're going to be talking about COVID and how we think it affected humanity. So come into class on Thursday night prepared to talk about how COVID affected the world. How do you think kindergartners were changed as a result of not being able to go to kindergarten or first grade, having to do kindergarten, first grade online? How do you think that affects young adults who were out pair bonding and looking for love? How do you think COVID affected people from the age of 18 to 20 who, instead of going to college and meeting guys and girls, had to go online and meet nobody? Exactly, John. We're going to discuss that in great detail on Thursday night. So I hope you come so that we can talk about that. Okay, quickly. We're good. Ah, great, Andrea. So you definitely should come. And then finally, we're going to run over time. We're going to talk about nature versus nurture, stability versus change, and continuity versus discontinuity. Nature and nurture, folks have probably heard that. How much of what you become as an adult is dependent upon your genes, and how much of it is dependent upon your environment. All of you are smart, and you know that it's going to be a mix of both. And what we're going to do over the course of this semester is we're going to talk about what part of your development is affected by your genes and what part of your development is affected by your environment. Stability and change. We're going to talk about personality and intelligence. Is it a fixed thing? Does it increase? Can your personality change in adulthood? How does it change? We're going to talk about stability versus change when we talk about all these human abilities. And then we're going to try to ask the question. This is a little more difficult to comprehend in 5 seconds, but we're going to talk about how human beings change. Do we actually evolve like butterflies? You know, a butterfly, it starts out as a caterpillar, then it goes into a pupa, and then it emerges as a butterfly. You would never guess that a caterpillar is going to turn into a butterfly. That's because the development of a butterfly is discontinuous. It changes completely differently. On the other hand, if you look at an oak tree, once it's sprouted, a little baby oak tree looks like a big oak tree. It's just not as big. That's what we would call continuous development. So I'm going to ask the question, when human personality change, does it just get more or does it fundamentally change? When your mind develops, does it just get faster and better? Or does your mind evolve differently like that butterfly that goes through three different stages? And so that's what we're going to cover this week. Okay, fantastic. So I have bored you for 52 minutes. Did you like that lecture? Of course you did. Oh my goodness. Thank you. That's so wonderful. Thank you very much for the applause. I appreciate that. I see some of you standing in the back. Please, you can sit down now. You can sit down. No need for a standing ovation. Fantastic. Okay, great, folks. Thank you very much for coming today. Please read your chapter. I hope you had a good time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to text, send me an email. I'm always interested in hearing from you. And if I don't hear from you tomorrow, I hope to see you Thursday morning in lecture at 10 a.m. You folks take a great day, have a great day, and I will see you later. Take care. Bye.